heard it. Welcome, my dear friends, and tonight we are going to look at the various discourses in the Gospel of Matthew. There are someone else there. Is that Luis? Welcome, Luis. There are 5 segments identified as 5 different discourses in the Gospel of Matthew. They are, as you see there, better move, the Sermon on the Mount, Mission Discourse, Parables of the Kingdom of Heaven, and Church Life, and the Last Judgment. The Sermon on the Mount perhaps is the most popular among all these 5 discourses. And within the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes perhaps is the most popular one. Yeah.
What does it mean by discourses?
Discourses means speeches.
Okay.
Yeah, not just speeches. It is a kind of enlightened sharing of the wisdom. Okay, the gurus always give discourses. Now, the Beatitudes are the most popular part of the Sermon on the Mount. We did look at the Sermon on the Mount in our last session, which was a few weeks ago. No, it's a couple of weeks. Couple of weeks ago. And tonight, we are going to look at the rest for the other 4 discourses. So as you can see, it's not going to be a commentary on the gospel. It will just be an introduction to the gospel, and we will be glazing through the gospel as such. It gives some idea of how the gospel is presenting the message, and from that we can also understand the message. That's the idea. A detailed look at the gospel with all the detailed commentary would take a much longer time. Unfortunately, this year we are not in a position to do so for that reason. So the second discourse, I must say one more word about the whole discourses before we move on to this mission discourse. As I said, there are 5 discourses. It's like 5 booklets. And it, in a way, is reminiscent of the 5 books which are called the Torah by the Jewish people. To them, they were the fundamental teachings on religion and how to organize themselves, what to follow, how to worship God, and what the religion should be like. Here in Matthew, in 5 discourses, he seems to teach his disciples how to lead a life of spiritual benefit in these 5 discourses. So, in the textual criticism of a Bible, or Christian criticism, that's got a negative meaning in our language. critique. In textual critique of the Bible, they say Matthew must have intended these 5 books or those 5 discourses to somehow present as the new Torah. That's one of the theories or one of the opinions, and that fits in very well. Okay? So that also tells us how important these discourses are in the gospel. And we saw how he set the whole background in that Sermon on the Mount, and Matthew, how he presented it as if a new Moses is giving the new law, sitting on a mountain, opening his mouth and teaching and so on. The same kind of background continues, but of course, in the rest of the discourses, he doesn't go into that kind of detail to make Jesus be presented as the new Moses is in the back of the mind of the reader as well as the evangelist.
Father,
Yes.
in all 4 Gospels, do they have the 5?
No,
Just in the Gospel of Matthew.
The question was whether there are 5 discourses in all 4 Gospels. No. This is something very specific to Matthew. But what is said in these 5 discourses, you see most of it in the other synoptic ones, like Mark and Luke. John has got a very different way of presenting things. So the idea may be there, but may not be the same narrative or the same phrases and language. So it's very different.
So is Matthew's interpretation of what happened in the Gospel, he's trying to tell us that it's like replacing Torah. So everything, and he focuses on delivering that type of message.
Yes. Once again, let me repeat the question for the sake of online participants. Whether Matthew, by doing this, is telling everyone Jesus is replacing Torah and the religion of Jewish people or the Hebrews. Yes, that's a short answer. And again, remember at the very beginning, he said, we read the Old Testament through the prism of Jesus Christ or Christ event. That's made all the more explicit by Matthew in doing all these things. Jewish people reading their Bible, which is our Old Testament, would be very different. Though the text is same, the way they would interpret is very different. Okay, the mission discourses from chapter 10, the whole of chapter 10, is a contingent call and commissioning of the disciples, the cost of the discipleship, and then conclusion. All 3 synoptic gospels account the choosing of 12 as apostles, but the names are not identical in all 3 gospels. There are some variations, like the names like Thaddeus. Matthew would have the name Thaddeus, whereas Luke would have Judas in his place. So there's some difference. Then again, it is not that important to have the names. The list of names are not as important as the number. The number is the most important thing. How many were there chosen? 12. And the 12 represents the 12 tribes of Israel. And in a way, by choosing the 12 as apostles, Jesus or the evangelist is presenting that Jesus has called the whole of Israel into his ministry of the kingdom of heaven. Jesus gives authority to the apostles to heal as Moses imparting his spirit to the elders of Israel. The commission to teach comes later in the gospel. It doesn't start there. Only at the very end, chapter 24, Matthew says, go and teach the whole nations what I taught and help them to observe what I taught you. So there is no teaching part of it in this commissioning, but he does give them power to heal and impart the spirit as Moses empowered his chosen people, the representatives from the various tribes. When we read that, that is in the Torah, in the book of Numbers. Now, it's interesting, the 12 were sent with the instruction, do not enter into Gentile territory, do not enter into Samaritan town. So confine yourselves to just the Israelite territory, don't go out. So in a way, Jesus was emphasizing that our mission is only to Israel. Gather them again. They are lost. Let's gather them again and help them into the kingdom of heaven. This seems to be the emphasis almost till the end of the gospel. Then, all of a sudden, Matthew says, Jesus told the disciples, called them to a high mountain in Galilee and said, now I want you to go to the whole world and preach to them and teach them what I taught and baptize them and help them to do what I help you to do. So almost all of the gospel is restricted to the Israelite territory, but towards the end, it is open the whole world.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think, in theory, why would Jesus just concentrate on Israel first?
Why did Jesus ask them to focus on Israel only? That's a good question. We can only, there's no explicit answer to that question in the gospel, so we need to speculate. Probably, this is my take on it. Matthew presents Jesus as the new Moses, and the new Moses is to gather the lost tribes of Israel, or the Israel that has gone wayward, like the prophets calling them back. So the people of God, they are already chosen, and now they have to live the godly ways. But after establishing that as his mission, later Matthew says, by the way, people of God just doesn't mean just you, but the whole world who is willing to follow you. So that could be one explanation. You're welcome to make your own explanation on it. Okay. Okay, now the cost of discipleship. In addition to self-imposed restrictions, there will be persecutions from others. This include Roman authorities or Herodians, The missionaries will be handed over to the authorities like Jesus was handed over to the authorities. They will flog you as Jesus was flogged, and local councils of Jews will persecute you. And Matthew uses the term their synagogue. Indicates that the Christians are already parted ways with the Jewish people. That's why their synagogue. It's not our synagogue, their synagogue. So initially, soon after Jesus' death and resurrection, the Christians consider themselves as part of the Jewish religion. They gathered together with the Jews in synagogues and so on. And after that sabbatical prayer or a prayer at the end of the week with the Jews, they would gather again on Sunday for the proper Christian one. That's how they were going. But eventually they were kicked out, and then they became totally different. And that's where their synagogue kind of expression comes from. Members of one's own family could be against you. The worst is the division in the family, but missionaries are to endure it till the last. Just because the family objects you, don't give up your faith and commitment to Christ. And apostates, that means those who disown their faith. These were the challenges they had. In response to perils, missionaries must first remember that they are heralds of the messianic reign of peace, when wolf and sheep dwell together, as Isaiah says. That means no violence. In spite of all the violence to you, you should not be resorting to any kind of violence. And this is a big ask, because Jesus' time had two kinds of groups, in addition to the people who obliged to everything that was going on or went by the flow. One reaction was to fight against the Romans violently through military initiatives. The other one was to run away from all this messy world and have a secluded life somewhere else, like the Essenes in Qumran and so on. This is, you don't run away from this situation, this world. At the same time, you don't retaliate violently. You can face all this violence peacefully, and that's what we should be doing. So that's something very special for special to Jesus, to his teaching. So that's the real cost of discipleship. And in conclusion, Jesus makes general statements indicating that his instructions are not just for the immediate disciples, but applicable to all disciples, even to the ages to come. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. May sound strange in a gospel of love. A disciple who does not love his or her family members and do not recognize God's love revealed in their dear ones will not be able to share the divine with the other outsiders. But for the disciples who are called to go away on mission are to subordinate their attachment to their families as part of focusing fully on their mission. That's the meaning of such a harsh statements. Okay. Let's move on now. The call and commission of the disciples we commit. I already spoke about the importance of 12, and I said the names are not that important, but primacy of Peter is maintained in all three synoptic gospels as well as in John's gospel. All four gospels emphasize the primacy of Peter. And the way it is presented to us is not a historical account of an early church. It is a presentation by the evangelist to make a point and to make clear what Jesus was teaching. And as we said about the disciples, even in the worst of adversities, they have to trust in God. Is that okay? Yeah, I had slides for all of this, persecution. I said that the disciples were to endure suffering and not to retaliate. At the same time, they were not to be naive about the opportunity. So whenever they can avoid, run away from the risk and the violence, they should do that. But never give up their faith and trust in God. That's the only thing. And disciple is not about the master, as we read in our prayer. And in the conclusion, it also speaks about the little ones. Don't be scandalous to the little ones. If you cause scandal, that will be a grave mistake. God will not forgive. Now, who are the little ones? Those who are weak in their faith and not strong enough. Now, there's a strange statement made by Jesus. I had not come to bring peace, but sword. That it is the sword of where the prophet speaks of, do not think that I have come to bring peace on earth. I have come to bring, no, I have not come to bring peace, but sword. The sword here is reference to the sword in prophet Ezekiel. Ezekiel reads like this, or suppose I were to bring a sword against that land and say, let a sword pass through the land, and I were to kill both people and animals. Now, where the prophet speaks of the sword of the discrimination that goes through the people, separating out those destined for destruction from those who will have mercy. The disciples are challenged to keep up their personal commitment to Jesus, even in the face of hostility and division it might cause. The core point is no retaliation, even in the face of division in the family. But God will make a discrimination. God will separate those who are to be destroyed or are not to be rewarded, and those who are to be rewarded. That's the meaning of that sword, so the separation. All right. Now there are a series of parables in chapter 13. There's a parable of the sower, the weed, mustard seed, yeast, and treasure, pear, dragnet, and so on. The 7 parables is structurally the center and the high point of the gospel. It's a great thing to have that kind of a textual critique. One of the study tools of the Bible is textual criticism, and they look at where the statements come, how it is presented, the language, and so on. And they have identified that these 7 parables, or chapter 13, comes right at the center of the gospel. If that is deliberate, then we can, in a way, say that is the central point Matthew makes. And that can be true because all 7 parables are about the kingdom of heaven. What is the kingdom of heaven like? Then he says a parable. Then again, what is it like? Another parable. Like that is 7 parables. And so the whole gospel is about the kingdom of heaven. So in that sense, it is the central teaching or discourse of the gospel. He said to them, well, therefore, every teacher of the law who becomes a disciple of the kingdom is like a householder who takes out from his storeroom things both new and old. It is self-portrait. It is a self-portrait. It means that's what Matthew is doing. Brings out all that is old and new. Now, what is old here? The Old Testament, the Torah, his reading of the Old Testament. And what is new? The teachings and the experience of Jesus Christ. So he brings out both. And the evangelist brings the old and new together. And that's what we see in the whole parables. As you can see, I'm not planning to comment on each of the parables. But let me see. The sower, of course, is about spreading the word, and the weeds about patience and tolerance. Don't weed them out. Keep till the harvest time. That's what Jesus said. So we need to be patient and tolerant. And like a mustard seed, which is the tiniest, the kingdom of God can grow extraordinarily big, even to the extent of bringing all the birds of the air to nest there. Means everyone from all corners of the world. The treasure, the point of if you find a treasure or someone who found a treasure, sold everything to buy that. The point of the parable is the behavior of all who sell everything to possess the treasure. That means the kingdom of heaven should be the prime interest. Sell everything else you have, all other possessions, all other interests, to acquire that kingdom of heaven. And the dragnet, that's the final parable, which in a way really says what Matthew intended to do. The old and new, the good and bad, everything is dragged together. Then the sorting out happens, which is up to the Lord. In between, there are also allegorical explanations of some of the parables. Okay, now the church life, chapter 18, the whole of chapter 18 is about church life. It, in fact, is an elaboration of Mark chapter 9, 33 to 47. As you can see, Mark's version is a very small, only 14 verses, whereas Matthew has got a whole chapter dedicated to it. It speaks about the need of humility and the care of the most vulnerable, and a procedure for reconciling with the aggravated members of the community, and Matthew also speaks about when forgiveness is aborted or when you can't actually forgive. Humility. The first 14 verses are about it. Disciples to make themselves last and serve others. And also children who are nobody in those days, vulnerable. He blesses them. They are to be protected and looked after. And hospitality to the little ones. Little ones are the ones who are weak in faith. They too should be included in our hospitality and welcome. Matthew does not spell out who are the little ones. They could be the new converts or those faith are not very strong. In this passage, the emphasis is not on the repentance of the lost sheep, but rather on the urgent task of the shepherd who follows God's will and experiences great joy in feeding the lost. So it's about the care rather than rewarding those who are repentant. So it's about our responsibility to others rather than waiting for their appropriate attitude or their state of sorry for their mistakes. Remember, this is about the Christian community, the early church. There are disputes like any other time and any other community. Things were not very smooth, and how to reconcile with them and how to keep the community together and how to make the church going. And that's where all these instructions come. Look after the vulnerable, the little ones, make them feel welcome. Yeah. And the focus is not on whether they are sorry for the mistakes they did. No, you have a responsibility to reach out. Now, in spite of all this, there will be people who are really big-headed and will not oblige to anything. So if they are rebels, try first the private confrontation, if not with a couple of witnesses, 2 or 3 witnesses, and have a reconciling chat. If nothing of this works, tell the whole church. Church means it was all small gatherings those days, so it was easy to consult the whole church. These days, if you were to say, tell the church, it has to mean the leadership of the church, but those days the whole congregation could be told. And even there, if they are not obliging, you can't do anything, let them go their way, that's it, give up on that. Perhaps to elaborate that, he also said the parable of the unforgiving servant. And in this story, Jesus exaggerates the figures. The parable of a talent is 10,000 talents. That should be 10,000 denarii. I wrote it wrongly again. 1 talent is 10,000 denarii, and $100 million, an enormous amount of money. No way anyone could have it. Even if you sell the whole kingdom, you can't get that kind of money. And what is that compared to 1 denarii? Just 8 hours of 8,000. Sorry, in my presentation, I made a lot of mugging up. So I was thinking and anyway, denarii is 1 day's wage, and 1 talent is 100 100 days wage. So forget about what you read on the screen. Just listen to me. Okay, I made a lot of mess up there. And the point is, the servant was forgiven by his master for a very huge debt, which he could never ever imagine to pay back. Yet he did not forgive his subordinate a very small amount of debt.
Who didn't forgive the servant? Or
The master's, the big servant or the steward. The steward was forgiven by the master a very huge debt,
but the steward did not
forgive his fellow servant or a subordinate a very small debt. What can you do with such people? If people are so hard, you can't do much. Cut ties with them. So the master sent him to jail and punishment. That here the master means God. So God will treat them accordingly. We are to be considerate and forgiving. He said, okay. Then the last judgment is warning against hypocrisy and 7 oaths, lament over Jerusalem, and eschatological discourses. These are part of the last discourse. The polemic between Matthean community and Jamnia scholars. Now you may wonder what all this means. Yeah. Matthean community means the community of Christians.
The polemic community?
Polemic means divided into two poles. Okay, there then two poles.
Two poles.
Yeah, part. That's what it is. Yeah. As I said earlier, Christians consider themselves as part of the Jewish community for a while, and things historically changed thereafter. Romans invaded Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and scattered the people. Sadducees were not found anymore anywhere, and they were not needed. Sadducees were the priests. Without temple, they don't have work to do, and there's no sacrifice, there's no temple, so Jews were at a loss. The best they could do was learn the scripture, meditate on it, and the Pharisees were the scholars and the scribes, of course, and they taught the scripture and invited people to meditate on that. That's what they could do best, and they did that in the synagogues. So that became the identity of Jewish people. And when Christians came there and they started to interpret the Bible through the prism of Jesus' experience, now we have a problem. The Pharisaic explanation and Christian explanations varied, you know. And also Christians had other rituals like the breaking of bread and so on. So some scholars who settled in near Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is the coastal towns of Israel, which was a capital of Israel. I say which was because now the Jewish people say Jerusalem is capital, though most of the things are done from Tel Aviv. Still, so near there was a place called Yamnia, and the scholars there, they said, no, these and these and these are the people who are real Jews. These are the books of Bible. The rest are not part of us. So there was a division. Okay. So the Yemeni scholars represent Jewish scholars or Jewish people, and Matthian community means Christianity at that time, and they went fall apart. Now, the Pharisaic explanation or commentary on Bible, they were not integral. There was a lot of hypocrisy in the way they said things, because they taught one things and practice different, and they could not discriminate between what is important and what is less important, and so on. So Jesus and thereafter the early Christians criticized the Pharisaic and mostly Pharisaic interpretations. But of course, it also speaks about the scribes who are also Bible scholars. So that's what is the theme of 23, chapter 23, verses 1 to 12. And as part of that, Jesus pronounces 7 oaths. 7, as you know, is a kind of a complete number. So that means a kind of comprehensive pronouncement of oath to all the Pharisees. There were opposition to Jesus from different directions, but Matthew unifies it and makes the scribes and Pharisees as the opponents. The Pharisees are accused of false teaching because they did not accept Jesus. These oaths are also directed to the complacency in Matthew's own community. It is not just directed to the Pharisees. Pharisaic like behavior within the Christian community also is condemned. Verses 13 to 14, scribes and Pharisees block the way of others to the kingdom of heaven. According to Matthew 16, 19, Peter is given the key to the kingdom of heaven. Peter and the leaders of the emerging Christian community are to be the authorities, not any of the Pharisees. Gentile converts to Pharisaism are twice as zealous and twice as misguided as their teachers. They will be called children of Gehenna than children of God. You know, Gehenna means children of hell. Gehenna actually was a place next to the Jerusalem temple where all the waste were dumped and set fire. And that fire would be burning all through the year because of so much of waste. So the imagery they use for the worst punishment is Gehenna. The free translation would be hell.
Johanna.
Gehenna, no Johanna. Gehenna. Gehenna. In Hebrew.
In Hebrew.
Yeah. Is it?
We say Shahanim.
All right. While you're Hinnon, which runs southwest of Jerusalem, it represents the place of fiery judgment, because it was there that fires of a cult Molech and later the smoldering refuse was located. There used to be infant child sacrifices and all kinds of things there in the past. Past means much before Jesus' time. At the time of Jesus, it was only a rubbish dump.
What was child sacrifice?
to propitiate God. So it was not part of the Jewish religion, but some of the Gentile religions came in and had their influence and so on there. So it had a very bad reputation for that, for that Gehenna. So that will tell you why that term Gehenna is used for hell, or the worst scenario you could think of. Now, different levels of oath taking is meaningless. Don't take oath on temple, on a head, and so on. You remember all those verses. It doesn't matter on what you take the oath. Oath taking is oath taking, and there are no different levels, and that is unnecessary. It's meaningless. Don't take your oath at all. That's what Jesus said. And he gave tithe of everything, even the little herbs. That's nonsense. It shows you are not integrated. You don't know how to distinguish between what is important and not. So, in all these things, the hypocrisy of the Pharisees are aimed at the old. Don't follow them. Be more sensible. Then comes to the last part of it, where Jesus enters Jerusalem and laments over Jerusalem. Now, here there is a big shift from vehement denunciation of the Pharisees, scribes, the Judaistic community, to profound sadness. The temple is going to be lost. Actually, by the time Matthew wrote these things down, the temple was already lost. It was already destroyed. The verses used there to express Jesus' sadness or lament over Jerusalem has got some Old Testament background. In Deuteronomy, a poem lament by Yahweh, recited by Moses to the people, is the background of the literary style of Matthew. He's not using exactly those words or that poem. Matthew's reading is much shorter, but that kind of background is there. Also, this was not the first time the temple was destroyed or desecrated. It happened before. That also has a background. And the other background is Psalm 61, which gives a kind of assurance of God's protection. But they wasted that assurance by their own misdoing. Now, eschatological discourses. That's the last part of it. The historical background is this. Matthew takes this discourse from Mark, and Mark's reflection was on Nero's persecution. Nero ruled between 54 and 68, that means just before the destruction of the temple. But things were very bad. From 66 or 65, 66 onwards, there was terrible fighting in Jerusalem or destruction. Therefore, the life of Christians and Jews were terrible, but particularly for Christians, it was terrible. And Nero took pleasure in or blamed Christians for all kinds of disasters or failures in his country, set them alight, threw them to the wild animals as a feed, and enjoyed the wild animals' tearing the people apart. That was his game. And by the time Matthew wrote, there was another notorious ruler and the domination's persecution was the real experience of Christians then. Therefore, Matthew has got double reason to narrate that persecution. As you know, the discourses are not pronounced by Jesus exactly as it is given to us. Evangelist puts the words of Jesus and his message together. Some of the messages may be given word or language by the evangelist, put together, and the construction of the discourse is the evangelist's job.
Well, obviously, Jesus was not present during the persecutions.
No.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's right. He wasn't present. Jesus died much before that.
Yes.
But he did warn them against persecution.
Yeah.
So Matthew elaborated on that in the light of what the Christians were going through then. One of the reasons to persecute Christians by domination and Nero, especially domination, was atheism. Now, when we atheism, what we think is atheism means no God, or saying that there is no God. But to the Romans, it meant something very different. To the Romans, there was only one God, and that is Caesar. And if anyone says Caesar is not God, he's atheist. So Christians were atheists. The Jews were atheists. And with all the calamities happening, people are wondering whether this is the end of time. And Jesus says, no. All these things will happen, but that doesn't mean it is the end of time. You are allowed enough time to spread the gospel all over the world, and the real end is not revealed to you, not even the Son of Man knows. That is, it's a secret from you, so nobody can really say the end is here. But it will look like a end. You have time to, God has allowed for you to go to the whole world with the mission of gospel. That's in short. But if you were to go for commentary, it would have been a very long one. Those who did mark with me knows that how much time we spent on that, just one discourse alone, the eschatological one. I think we spent 2 days. So this is just kind of overall introduction to the gospel. Now tell me, how do you see it? And next week, we'll be looking at the narratives. And once again, it will be another marathon session like this. We look at the whole narrative and how it fits in with the gospel and the framework of it. And that way we can find a meaning as we read it. That's the idea. Any comments, questions?
Yeah, Father, I have three.
Yeah. Yeah, Gloria has got 3 comments or 3 questions.
No comments, just questions.
Questions, 3 questions.
The first question was, were Jews exclusive to Israel? Were there no other Jews anywhere else outside of Israel at the time?
There were, the question is whether there were Jews outside Israel. There were Jews outside Israel. But when in the gospel speaks about the chosen people, they didn't say the territory, but they said that the Israelites, primarily it meant Israel. Like the Lebanese, when we say Lebanese, the primary thought is about the people in Lebanon, though there are Lebanese people all over the world. Okay, that's the same way.
But that's what I mean, but
Yeah.
although they were around the world, but they were the only ones that had the Jewish faith.
No, the other outsiders also had Jewish faith.
Okay,
Yeah. And they were meant to come once a year to the temple and worship and so on.
okay.
But their frequency may be less because they have to travel farther and so on. Yeah.
Next question was, when did Christians in the Mass start to consecrate the Eucharist? Like when, like, you know, you said that they were sharing, Christians were, you know, going to the synagogue.
Yeah.
When did they actually start, you know, how we have our Mass? When
Yeah.
we start to, you
Yeah.
know,
When did the breaking of bread start? Going by what we read in the Gospels and the Acts of the Apostles, they started more or less straight after the resurrection. Now, we can't give the exact time. What happened was after Jesus' death and resurrection, the disciples were totally lost because they thought that the whole world is against them. They were to kill them and so on. They were terrified and they locked themselves indoors. But they remembered one thing. Jesus, after the breaking of bread, he said, "Do this in memory of me." So they gathered together in spite of the terrible risk they are facing or aware of that, and still they gathered and they broke bread. And then they had this special experience of Jesus being with them. So it started very early. And also it was done in secret. And to indicate the gatherings, it happened in the homes. There were no churches, so they couldn't do that in synagogues. They had to do it in their own homes. And in secret they did. Now, how do we tell the people? No WhatsApp those days. So they had to use coded language. There are two symbols they use to tell others there is a breaking of bread here. One is to light a candle and leave it on the window. And other Christians knew that, that means they're gathering here for breakfast. The other one was draw a fish on the door or on the doorway. When they saw that, this is where they gather to break bread. And only the Christians knew that this is what the symbol meant. Now, why fish? Nobody can give an adequate answer, but that was a symbol used by the early Christians to tell others that this gathering has been happening there.
okay, and my last question.
Yeah, one more question. Yep.
Sorry, Father, but yeah, why did Jesus choose Peter to be, you know, the head of the church? Was there any significance in what tribe he came from in Israel?
Why did Jesus choose Peter to be the lead figure? Is it because he came from the lead tribe? First of all, Jesus did not pick 12 people from 12 different tribes.
To represent the 12 tribes of Israel.
This, the number represented that he is representing all tribes, but he did not choose representatives from each tribes. All 12 were from mostly from Galilee. I think Judas was Iscariot, it was out. And James was his brother, cousin brother, whatever. So they did not represent the tribes in the sense that they came from many tribes. Is not choose from the different tribes. Now, why did Jesus choose Peter to be the leader? That's a good question. That was his own choice. We don't know. But we know that Jesus moved out of his own home in Nazareth and made Peter's house as his own home. He stayed with Peter. So they had a strong bonding. In spite of having his own cousin or brother in the group, he still entrusted the leadership role to Peter. And Peter was not the most ideal disciple, as we know from the Gospels themselves. He denied Jesus at least 3 times while Jesus was going through the passion. Yet he was made the leader. Even John, who more or less presents himself as the most favored disciple of Jesus, tells that Jesus has had his primacy in the church. That's how Jesus wanted. So all 4 Gospels speak of or presents Jesus as the first or the leader of the rest of the group. So the only answer to that question is it was Jesus' own choice. His free choice. So even now, it need not be the most cleverest or most influential person who is chosen to lead the church, a Holy Father, but it's the choice of the Spirit of God, the right person, that's all.
Father, the narratives for next week, where do they come from? Which chapters?
I have to send you because there's a long list of chapters. Yeah, it's next week's reading, like tonight's, will be a long list.
So just a quick question.
Yep.
When going back to the avoiding of forgiveness and leaving in God's hands and God's power.
Yeah.
What does the Torah or the Old Testament teach about an unforgiving person? Or somebody who has a debt with you and you choose not to forgive them. What is the Torah to you? Is it the opposite to what Matthew's Discourses, or is it?
There are various parts speaking about various things. For example, if a man is mauled or killed by a ox, a cow of the other tribe, then give the man or the owner of the cow 30 coins, what it's not talents, 30 silver or whatever. I can't remember exactly what the name of the coin. Anyway, give 30 pieces of money and buy that ox, and that will be the remuneration. Or give that 30 to the killed man's family. So it was all about making remunerations. And if someone beat you on one cheek, then you can give one thrash back. So the
An eye for an eye.
eye for eye, tooth for tooth. The retaliation was accepted. The retaliation business, eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, was not written anywhere in the Old Testament, but that was a accepted norm then.
Is that what the Pharisees and scribes adhered to, that they would actually promote something like that? If somebody did do something wrong, that they would be punished through some sort of...
Compensation.
It's no different to the way we think. If you go to a court or any kind of arbitration, in some sense, we settle on some kind of retribution or compensation. We may call it compensation, but it's another kind of retribution.
Yeah.
There is no question of forgiveness or absolution.
Yeah, I was just trying to work out how they were trying to distinguish themselves from the Jewish teachings, because that's basically what that discourse is about. It's about saying, we're not, we are going to abandon the Jewish
Yeah.
teachings, and this is what we would like to.
There are two dimensions to it. One is individual's life. The other one is communitarian life. Perhaps more important is the communitarian dimension. In the communitarian dimension, they were a persecuted people, oppressed by the Romans, and they have to address that situation. The Maccabean Revolution and all similar as groups like the Zealots and so on, they took arms to fight with them. So make them pay for it through your own aggression and violence. The other group, like the Essenes and so on, who went to the desert and said, we don't want to have anything to do with this corrupt world. We'll spend a holy and pure life away from all that. We'll study, read Bible, study it, pray, do our rituals. These are the two normal responses. And there are two extremes. Jesus said, neither of them is right. You are in the world and you stay in the world. Of course, the synoptic gospels don't use those kind of language, but John uses it. But you can conquer it. You need to be prudent like snakes, but gentle like dove.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Any online questions?
No, just had a good instruction on what you've already said. Thank you, Father.
Thank you, thank you. So next week, next Tuesday, we shall look at the narrative part of the gospel, which once again will be